is drawing attention to the risks of a common surgery for millions of women, C-section. Judge Hatchet's beautiful daughter-in-law, Kira Johnson, pictured here, she died last April after the scheduled C-section delivery of her second child. Her husband, Charles, filed a medical malpractice lawsuit this week against Cedar Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, claiming that Kira's death was the result of improper and untimely treatment. Cedar Sinai says in a statement that they are, quote, deeply saddened by the death and the toll it is taking on Kira's family. They also state Cedar Sinai is firmly committed to the highest levels of quality, has a comprehensive program to review any problems in patient care, and takes action anytime it needs to make changes to maintain our high level of quality. Anytime there are concerns raised about a patient's medical care, we conduct an investigation to determine exactly what happened, including reviewing hospital procedures and the competency of healthcare providers, and make changes as needed to ensure that we provide the highest quality medical care. Well, joining me now, and I'm sure those words are empty to both of you, Judge Glenda Hatchet and her son Charles S. Johnson. I have to begin with you. How you doing?
It's challenging. It's challenging. As we approach Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day to my mom and all the mothers that are celebrating Mother's Day. But because of the events that took place on April 12th, my sons will never be able to celebrate Mother's Day with their mother. So it's challenging, but, we're committed to making sure that this never happens to anybody else's family ever again.
So walk us back, and I hate almost doing this, but you and Judge Hatchet, you even said the reason we're doing this is so that it happens to no one else. Walk us through. Scheduled C-section.
Yes.
Everything seems to be going according to plan, but something took a terrible turn.
Absolutely. So we're talking about a woman that's not just in good health. We're talking about a woman that was in exceptional health.
No pre-existing conditions.
No pre-existing conditions. A baby that, by all signs, was extremely healthy. So there was not a rush. Who walked into what I understood to be, and what we thought to be, a world-class facility in Cedar Sinai Hospital.
It is reputed to be.
Correct, particularly in the area of labor and delivery. So as a father, as a husband, you want the best for your children.
Of
you want
course.
the best for your wife. And unfortunately, she walked in, and shortly after the procedure, they discovered that something had gone wrong, and they noticed that she was bleeding internally. But the troubling part, and the thing that I want to call attention to, and I want to make sure it happens never again to nobody else's family, is that she was allowed to suffer and bleed internally for more than 10 hours, while myself and my family begged for the staff to take action.
And they did not.
And they did not.
And what does the hospital say? I mean, we read the statement, but what did they say at the time? Did they say, and I'm sure your baby is suffering, watching his wife suffer, so you are a mama bear that is wanting answers.
That's true. And we did meet, and the hospital administrator did confirm that had they gotten her back into surgery, she would be alive. And that is the heart-wrenching part of this, to lose her, but to lose her under these circumstances. And Michaela...
And it could have been avoided.
It could have been avoided.
Could have been avoided.
And the reason that we filed the lawsuit is because we want answers. We want, and as Charles always says, Kira lived her life in a way to hope people. She was a generous, loving woman, but she also believed in accountability.
Yeah.
And we have to do this. And the reason we're coming forward now is to give voice to this, because this cannot happen ever
again. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. And the idea that they're doing we appreciate that they're doing what they can to make sure it doesn't happen. But at the same time, you can't close the barn door after the horse is out.
Correct.
And nothing can ever bring her back. And Langston will never know his mother. She died a few hours after he was born. Charles was 18 months old, and he'll come to me and say, Grandma G, where's my mommy? And, his dad is an exceptional father to these boys. And we're trying to explain it, and Charles will say, well, your mom is in heaven. And, it's better you tell her.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I never want any other father to have to explain to their 2-year-old, where their mommy is and why she's not ever coming home.
Yeah.
I never want for another family to have to try and explain to a 1-year-old who will never know his mother just how amazing she was. And thank you, I appreciate it. But it's one of those things this is something that can't happen to anybody else's family. But I am so fortunate to have these these two amazing gifts that my wife gave me.
And for them,
yes.
and for her, I get the sense why you're filing this
Absolutely.
lawsuit, to make sure it doesn't happen again and to get accountability.
Absolutely.
Judge Hatchet, Charles, my deepest condolences. They sound empty. They don't mean to be. There are no words to tell you my sadness that I know you feel. I want to talk a little bit more about how something like this, sections are supposed to be really routine, so we thought we'd invite on an OBGYN, Dr. Sujatha Reddy. You've been so fantastic about answering our questions before. And are we mistaken in thinking that C-sections are routine? I mean, well, let's be honest. Childbirth is pretty invasive, but aren't C-sections supposed to be a very common routine practice?
Thank you, Michaela. And you're right. They are common and routine. They're done, obviously, all around the country all the time. But they do have risks. And as you said, so does childbirth. But luckily, the risk of dying from a C-section is, about 2 per 100,000. And the most common risk with C-section is going to be infection, but then comes bleeding as a common one, because the uterus sometimes just doesn't know how to contract after a C-section like it might after a vaginal delivery. But you are right. In general, C-sections are safe. They're usually very routine. And what happened here is clearly a tragedy.
Clearly a tragedy. It sounded like things were missed. It wasn't the risk associated. It sounded like she did not have at all, that the family knew of, pre-existing condition that might have made her a risk for this kind of thing. Something clearly went wrong. And that, as a doctor, that's not the kind of thing you prepare for those things to happen, but it sounds as though something egregious happened in this situation. I know you weren't there, Dr. Reddy, but what is your assessment of what went on here?
It sounds like there was some internal bleeding, and again, I wasn't there, and I have not seen all the records, and but it sounds like there was some internal bleeding, and if perhaps they should have found it sooner, I'm not sure. I just, again, this is a tragic situation, and I hope it never happens again. But bleeding is a known risk for any surgery, but specifically for C-sections.
When you're going in as a mom who has a C-section planned, we know we have to be our own best patient advocate, right? So to our family members, are there things we can ask about? Are there things that we can ensure from the doctor?
Obviously, you want to go to someone that's a board-certified OBGYN. You want to be in a good, reputable, big hospital that does this all the time, which obviously Cedars is. And beyond that, you really are going to rely on the hospital and the staff, but it sounds like, we have educated people here that were advocating for this patient, which is the best thing you can do.
And they were at a world-renowned hospital in Los Angeles. It is a tragedy all around. Dr. Sujatha Reddy, thank you so much for joining us. And again, the best to both of you. Keep us posted on how the lawsuit goes.
And may I say that the complaint, anybody can pick up this complaint and read exactly what